And welcome once again to Nothing Like a Good Book, and this one too. The title of it is called No Soldier Left Behind, and it's part of the Don Steele's Legacy series that shares the inspirational tale of honored veteran John G. Kalhavy, a true American hero, and I don't very often get a chance to interview a true American hero. So, in fact, it's an honor to capture the life and times of a man who overcomes every obstacle that gets in his way. And out of White Lake in Michigan, the Don Steele, Ph.D., of course, wrote the book. He continues his highly praised legacy series with the biography of Brigadier General John J. Kalhavy. Welcome, Brigadier. What do you want me to call you, sir? John?
John, that's fine.
All right.
And I don't really consider myself a hero, but thank you.
Well, thank you for your service, firstly. I guess to write this book, Don must have gone through a lot of personal stories, interviews with friends, and the addition of relevant poems and lyrics, because No Soldier Left Behind, I mean, the book stretches from your childhood right through to the present day, highlighting your accomplishments, impacting both military and non-military life as well.
Yes, he does.
So what was that like when you go through something like that?
Well, Don approached me. He said, your background is the most fascinating of anyone I've ever known. I would like to write a book about your life story. Now, the book wasn't written with the intention of it ever becoming a bestseller or even being available for publication. It was written because between my wife and I, we have 15 grandchildren.
Oh,
None
boy.
of them know anything about my background.
Right.
And I wrote it so if they want to know something about my background, they can read the book. That was the purpose.
Well, that's not a bad idea, is it? So
No, I don't think so.
it's a pretty good book. I mean, in No Soldier Left Behind, in this case, I'm reading from John J. Kelly of the Detroit Free Press. I always talk about the critics and their accolades and so on. And he says that the author brings to life an impressive hero both on the field of battle and off, offering a true inspiration in how to live a life. That's why he highly recommends it. So, it's not just about being in war. It's being today and surviving and business and being, no matter what brick walls seem to come, you just go through them. You share actually in the book, and I think it'll be wonderful for the grandchildren that the hurdles that you overcame in your childhood. Apparently, you had family financial struggles. Father left them when you were just a teen, and your journey through education, right? So, upon joining the ROTC in college, this is where you learn to pilot helicopters, and eventually leading to your deployment to Vietnam. I find this amazing, listeners, I really do. And what can you share about that era, John, for you? Let's take the teenage era. I mean, I grew up without a dad. He died in World War II. So...
well, thanks for his service. Thank you for his service.
Yeah, and the ultimate. And, I wonder what it was like for you. Were you close to your mom?
Very close to my mother. She was the most generous person I had ever known. Everything that she had, she basically gave away to help people. And I followed her footsteps, and unfortunately, I've been taken advantage of on many occasions because I'm soft-hearted.
Mm-hmm.
But I have no regrets.
Soft-hearted but hard-skinned. I mean, you fought in over 300 combat missions. You survived 2 helicopter crashes and transported multitudes of wounded soldiers from the battlefields. So after retiring from active duty, you returned to Michigan, picked up a job as a highly successful financier and an investor. And that's what you've been doing for, how long now?
I was a financial advisor for 48 years with Merrill Lynch, and I served 35 years between active and reserve. 5 months after leaving active duty, while I was training with Merrill Lynch, I was recruited to join the Army Reserve, form an aviation unit, and run it, and that's what I did.
So that would have been a hell of a challenge at the time.
It was like working 2 full-time jobs, but I've always relished a challenge. My life has been based around taking things that are broken and trying to make them better than they ever were before. And I could give you many examples of that. But it was a challenge, yes. But I told my wife and my daughters, when I die, I only want 2 words on my tombstone: no regret.
Well, that's pretty cool.
I strongly feel that way.
That's very good for a man that's done so much. In fact, I'd like to know more. I'd like for you, John, to share some experiences for my listeners with you, because I personally didn't get to Vietnam, although I was involved in another way, but I had a lot of friends I lost. And, it looked pretty bad with some of the things. I mean, I know, did you ever meet any Aussies over there when you were in Vietnam?
Meet what?
Any Aussies, any Australians?
Yes, I did. They fought with us. They were good soldiers. The Koreans were good soldiers. I don't look back at Vietnam as a harrowing experience. I look back as the best lesson I've ever had in my life, and I think it served me well going forward. Mm-hmm. I learned 3 things at a very young age that I don't believe I would have learned anywhere else. First of all, at a young age, at age 23, I was responsible for 5 M60A1 tanks. That was the Army's main battle tank at the time. I was responsible for their crews, and they were the only tanks located on Fort Knox main post that have a full complement of live ammo. And my job was to protect the vault in the event of ground or air attack. At the time, I thought it was pretty serious stuff. I look back now, I'm not even sure if there's any gold there. And then at age 24, I was leading combat missions with 10 or more helicopters in Vietnam, with 4-man crews at each, and 6 and sometimes 7 infantrymen on each aircraft. Mm-hmm. So I learned responsibility at a young age. You learn to make decisions very quickly, and they have to be the right ones, or somebody could be injured or possibly die. Mm-hmm. And the third thing I learned was how people acted under tremendous stress. And the interesting thing, I found no correlation between physical stature and courage. The meanest, toughest guys oftentimes fell apart when the bullets started flying, and the 90-pound weaklings rose to the occasion. It was a very great learning experience that benefited me tremendously.
Well, you certainly have a very different, attitude towards it compared to some others. But what about you when, that service is amazing. You saved a lot of boys. You were flying yourself, right?
I had a 4-man crew at every Huey, yes.
And what sort of weaponry did you have on you to help the boys on the ground?
We had 2 M60 machine guns, one on each side, mounted by the gunner and the crew chief. And on our gunships, we had mini guns, 2 mini guns on each side that fired. Those are M60 machine guns. We had a 20 millimeter grenade launcher on the nose, and 14 rockets, 7 on each side. So we had the gunships had a lot of firepower. Yeah. But most of my flying was in they were called slicks, the troop carriers.
Right. And today, do you keep it up at all? Do you fly as a hobby, or did you fly when you got out?
I gave that up many years ago. I flew in the Army for 18 and a half years. I had 3,600 hours at Huey's when I finally retired. I was in the reserve. I was a lieutenant colonel at the time, and I got a call from the air section at Selfridge Air National Guard Base that we had a cutback in funding. I had to remove 2 pilots from flight status. The air section fell under me. At that time, I was the Division G3 in charge of all operations and training. And I said, take the 2 highest ranking officers off flight status. The individual at the other end of the phone said, you're the highest ranked. I said, correct. It wasn't right for me to do it as a secondary job and end the career of a young pilot. So at that point, I quit. I had 18 and a half years flying, more than enough time. I received my Master Wings. That's the highest symbol of wings you could wear, and I was content. And then I became an infantry commander.
You really did it all right?
I had a great career, no complaints.
And All of that time, you got through without any scratches, or did you? Because the two.
I had a few scratches. The second time I got shot down, I got a pretty a lot of cuts, a fairly deep cut below my left ear. Tore some muscles in my back, but nothing that stopped me. I kept moving. 3 days later, I was back in the air flying again.
Well, this is why, Don Steele, Dr. Donald Steele, PhD, the author, wrote about you because, he says it's an honor to capture the life and times of a man who overcomes every obstacle that gets in his way, and you need that in life today. No matter what, to survive, you've got to be able to do exactly that. In fact, now, who's the second act? Well, Michael B. Butler, he's the co-author of Without Redemption. He says, talk about a life lived with humble determination and integrity. Indeed, the arc of John G. Culhavey's experiences are like several different people, but they are all just him. I'm in awe. That was Michael Butler. So you've got a lot of people that think the world of you, know that?
Thank you. I appreciate that very much.
Do you feel embarrassed at all? A book written about you?
No, I wouldn't say embarrassed. I'm not used to talking about myself. Let's put it that way. And I've done a couple of these podcasts now, and I just tell it the way it happened.
Okay, and if I was to ask Don Steele, what impresses you most about this guy, right? What is it that talks your cork, Don? He'd probably say, well, John abides by this expressed commitment to leave no soldier behind. He stays true to the military values of personal responsibility, duty, honor, and faith, emphasizing John's loyal nature. So John shows a consistent commitment to his community, providing generous support to Central Michigan University and backing entrepreneurial ventures. Let's talk about that. As you said and explained, when you were flying, you had the boys, you'd go back in, you'd saved a lot of soldiers, got them out of there and did all of that. That took a lot of tenacity, a lot of guts. All right, now we're out of the military. What am I going to do with my life? I've learned to do this, learned to do that. How, where's the connection then coming in for, well, I guess you always wanted to do good, so you're going to offer and help, but how did you get involved with the university?
My last assignment on active duty, I was responsible for the ground instructors at the Army's primary helicopter training center. At that time, I was at Fort Walters, Texas, 45 miles west of Fort Worth. It closed after the war. And I was the ranking captain of 27, which means I was promoted in advance of my contemporaries. So I was responsible. I put in the most time, had the most responsibility, and at the end of the month, we all drew the same paycheck. So I decided when I left active duty, and I left because my first wife said, if it were up to me, I would have stayed in the military. I loved it. I was shot down twice, had a child in between, and she said, why don't you try civilian life for a year? If you don't like it, you can always go back in the Army. I thought it was a reasonable request, so that's what I did. Anyway, I was looking for a career that would benefit or basically reward me for my personal efforts and tenacity, if you want to put it that way.
Sure.
And I learned a little about the brokerage business when I was on active duty from a couple of guys that I worked with at Fort Walters. It sounded like an interesting career, but I had none of the background that was required. I was a tank commander and then a helicopter pilot. I didn't have a background in sales, marketing, finance, banking, anything to do with it. But I had to fly to Detroit for an interview with the manager, the best manager I ever had, Fred Pickard, who died several years ago. He was an outstanding individual, one of the finest people I've ever met in my life. I flew in. My flight was late getting here because if you flew in uniform, you got a discounted airfare, and I was making a limited amount of money, and I had limited time off. My flight was late, so one of my brothers picked me up, and instead of going to my mother's home and changing and putting a suit on, he took me straight to the Merrill Lynch office. I walked in uniform. Mm-hmm. The manager, I believe, recognized the ribbons I was wearing, and I believe that's what got me the job. Mm-hmm. I didn't have the qualifications, but I think he was willing to give me a chance, and he did.
And so, and that role was what exactly? What did you start learning?
I trained to be a financial advisor. It was about a 1-year training period program. You train in-house with different books you had to read and exercises you had to complete.
You had to get a license?
Merrill Lynch had you had to spend 3.5 months in New York. Merrill Lynch had a wonderful school there.
Right.
And at the end of the 3.5 months, you took all your tests. I passed mine. I came back. I was registered and ready to go.
So when you say took your test, so that's a national test, is it, for financial advisors?
There were several. There was a National Association of Securities Dealer, the SEC. There were several tests. A couple of them were combined in one, and I was fortunate enough to pass them. And I finished second in my class, and I don't remember, there were 40 or 50 in the class. So because of that, my manager gave me a $25 pay raise, which back then was a lot of money.
My word, it would have been. Yes, yes. You know, the irony of it is you never earned much money in the military, you know, and yet your life's on the line. I hope you got a house out of it, did you, with your wife there?
Yes, my wife and I, we lived in the same house for 53 years. I loved it the day I moved in. We still love it, and I'll die here. It's not a big fancy house, but we're overlooking a beautiful lake, and we love it.
Right,
it's a very modest home.
Oh, very nice, very nice. But did you have a house, you know, when you were in the military?
Yes, I built a house when I went back after Vietnam. When I went back to Texas on the VA bill, and rather than rent, I bought a house and lived in it for about 1.5 years.
Right.
And then I sold it when I was leaving active duty to return to Michigan. And I had $3,200 saved from Vietnam, and I bought a house in Michigan. And if it weren't for Fred Pickard, I wouldn't have been able to buy the house. Every bank I called turned me down because I couldn't afford the payment. I was making $775 a month. Mm-hmm. And Fred came up to me one day and said, "How are you coming on your mortgage?" Now, at that time, Detroit Bank and Trust, which is now called Comerica, was a major bank in Detroit. Merrill Lynch was their biggest customer. Fred was a very influential man in Merrill Lynch. He said, "Who did you talk to?" I named all of the banks. He said, "Did you call Detroit Bank and Trust?" I said, "Yes, I talked to the head of the mortgage department, a guy by the name of Bill Miller." And he basically kind of laughed at me and said, "There's nothing you can do for me." Fred said he did, eh? He said, "I'll be back." 5 minutes later, Bill Miller called me and said, "How much money do you need? We'll finance the whole thing." It was $56,000 was the purchase price of the house.
Wow.
And if it weren't for Fred, I wouldn't have my house today. I'm very cognizant of that, and I'm very thankful to the man for everything I learned from him.
Very nice. It's good to have something good happen to you like that in life. You deserve it, in my opinion. You do provide, I don't know if you still do, but you provided generous support to Central Michigan University and backing, you know, entrepreneurial ventures with them. You still connected there?
Yeah, very much. Actually, this coming Friday, I'm on the advancement board at Central, and I'll be attending that session. And then that evening, I host an annual get-together for my former fraternity brothers, who are all north of 80 now.
Right.
And they show up every year for homecoming. It's a big deal at Central.
Now, all of this is in the book. We're talking about No Soldier Left Behind. Right, it's the life and times of Brigadier General John G. Kalhavy, the United States Army, retired. And by the way, the book available, folks, is at Amazon and Barnes and Noble. Okay, Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and written by. Normally, I do the authors, don't I? Which is nice for a change. The author is Don Steele, of course, PhD, Dr. Don Steele, and. He earned his Bachelor of Science and Master of Arts degrees from Central Michigan University, so I think there's a connection there. Doctor of Philosophy degree from the Ohio State University. He's a bit of a brain, this guy, isn't he? He's authored...
we were actually roommates for a period of time at Central.
Oh, were you really? How about that? And then years later...
Yeah, so people don't know this about Don. He's a very prolific singer and songwriter. He worked his way through college by... he had a band,
Really?
and we all lived together. I was the only guy in the band, or I was the only guy in the room that wasn't part of the band, but I gave him moral support. And they would perform 2-3 nights a week in local bars, and that's how Don made it through college.
How about that, see? Great story. Someone should write that about him. He'd be interesting. Now, he'd be interesting to talk to. There's no doubt about it. Don, he founded Performance Learning, Inc., didn't he? A business dedicated to educating, motivating, and empowering athletes, entertainers, leaders, and teams across the spectrum of business, industry, and education. Did you get to be a keynote speaker for him at all during...
Yes, I have on a couple of occasions at Saginaw Valley State College, where he is a professor, and I'm scheduled to be back there again in November.
Yes. He served as an adjunct professor, didn't he, at several universities?
Yes.
Harvard, the Ohio State, Central Michigan University, Saginaw Valley State University.
Yep.
And he's authored 7 books, and there's a new one. It's called Undefeated, to give him a plug here. The true story of the successful 3-generation family-owned and operated Shepler's Mackinac Island Ferry Service.
Mackinac Island,
Mackinac, yeah, right, okay. He's currently writing Rebel Without Applause, the true story about John Hall and the success of his family-owned and operated Glass Tender, LLC. You know all about that, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's his prolific writer. Good on him. And had got his way through a band and singing and that in college. Good on him. And look at the degrees he's got now and what he did. No soldier left behind. Now, 15 grandchildren, it's important when they read the book. The biggest thing, John, that you would like for them to take away, right, from reading this book, you hope for what?
I hope they grow up to have honesty, integrity, to be tenacious, to never quit, and to give it their best effort in every endeavor. I don't believe you could truly excel at anything unless you love what you do. And when I speak to young people today, I tell them that. I say, if you look in the mirror every day and say to yourself, if today was the last day of my life, would I do what I'm about to do? Whenever the answer comes up no too many times, make a change. Don't settle for mediocrity.
Well, you're one out of the box, General, because you have donated millions of dollars to Central Michigan University's neuroscience program, ROTC programs, and the athletic department. In fact, you must be proud. 2 buildings now carry your name. Is that correct?
You gave me a little emotional. I'm not used to talking about myself. Yes, I do have 2 rooms and or 2 buildings and a number of rooms.
Hey, come on. Now, part of all this motivational jazz you talk about is being able to pat yourself on the back a little bit that you've deserved it, right?
I was very fortunate in the brokerage industry, and probably my crowning achievement was when I went into the business, we all worked as individuals. There was a bullpen with rows of desks, and you had a phone and a computer. And I kept going to Mr. Pickard, my manager, and saying, I really believe we can provide better service and certainly better performance if we operated as teams of specialists rather than individuals. Mm-hmm. I said, specialists do better than general practitioners, and we're general practitioners. The array of products was so vast, I didn't believe anyone could master all of them. And so after bringing this up many times, about a year and a half into my tenure at Merrill Lynch, he called me in his office one day, handed me a round-trip ticket to New York to fly in one morning, come back that night, and he arranged for me to have a 1-hour meeting with Donald Reagan. Wow. Donald Reagan was the chairman of the board of Merrill Lynch. He later became the Secretary of Treasury and then Chief of Staff for President Ronald Reagan. So I flew to New York. We sat in his office. He made more in an hour than I did in a month. I'm sure of that. He had a huge office. He was about my size and stature, not a big man. but he was a combat veteran Marine in World War II. I was Vietnam. We had something in common. I told him how I thought these teams should be structured, how they should be organized and managed. He took copious notes, asked a lot of questions. At the end of the hour, he said, I like your idea. Do it. Picked up the phone, called Mr. Pickard, and let him form a team. That was the first team in the history of the brokerage industry in 1971. Today, about 80% of all advisors are on teams. They want them all to be on teams. They've seen the benefit of it. So I'm pretty proud of that.
Yeah, very good. The legacy lives on, no doubt about it. And in those days, 71, the money that they make today, you wouldn't have made the same. And yet you did very well. You did exceptionally well from nothing and built up and became very successful at being a broker because you made a bloody fortune, didn't you?
Well, yeah, if you put it that way, yes, you're right. Yeah, I did fine. Let's put it that way.
If you like.
But I still live a very modest lifestyle.
Yes.
And I help where help is needed for what I consider to be good causes.
All right, I'll keep you in mind. I've got a great cause in mind.
Okay.
No. It's military oriented because I'm a great believer of the men and women that leave the military. 150,000, a year or something or other, and they train specifically to do specific things. But a lot of them would like their own business, and they'd like to be funded. They'd like to be this. So I've written a show called Taking Point. And it's a podcast, but online, and a national show that I wanted to do where it interviewed lots of all sorts of vets that have come out in business, been successful, what they're doing now and what they've done, but others that would like to be. And at the end of the show, and you can tell me straight off now whether it's a silly idea or not, but at the end of the show, I wanted to have both sides of the darn floor, the Dems and the Republican generals, decision makers in war, to argue out where are we, do we belong in these wars, how long they're going to go on, and what we should do about them. And that would wrap it up. And I thought, I wonder if anybody would ever go for that, being an honest, down the line, be open and, straightforward and tell it like it is. Because the way we are...
I think most veterans would give you an honest answer on every one of those topics. At least I certainly could, and I think they would too.
Yeah, that's good. Well, in the last 2 minutes we've got, give me your ideas of what you think of today, where we're at. There's a lot of Americans are very nervous and not themselves and fear, and there's nothing worse. I mean, I come from a country to the great America. I mean, without America, we'd be all Japanese by now in Australia, put it that way. So we're grateful, at least I am. But
I think our country's in trouble, and it's very worrisome to me. We have more threats today than at any time in the history of our country between Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. Mm-hmm. Our economy is not in good shape. Interest rates are far too high. It's affecting a lot of business owners. Borrowing money is a nightmare. I think we're in trouble, and I'm hoping that all changes in a month.
In a month, huh? All right. Let's hope so, because things have to get better. One way or the other, they've got to get better. But, you're right. All those mentioned, and the Houthis. And, Iran does a lot of trouble that people don't realize, a lot of trouble.
And there's an easy solution to that. Bomb their refineries. That's their sole source of income.
Yeah, but they're close to nuclear now, and some idiot gave them millions back. I won't go into that, but,
I'd like to close by relating a story to you.
Please
when
do.
I was in Vietnam, we were authorized 52 pilots in my unit. We never had more than 46. We were always short of pilots. Mm-hmm. And it was like being an attorney, a bunch of young hotshots who all thought they were the world's greatest helicopter pilots. And in our spare time, we always thought of things to do. Our base camp was located at Cu Chi. That's spelled capital C-U, capital C-H-I, because we were right adjacent to the village of Cu Chi. Now, we fly 3-4 nights a week, sometimes all night, on various missions. The mission that we hated the most, we're going into the middle of nowhere and landing in the middle of the night, picking up bodies. And every night when we come in, they shooted us from the village. We'd see the tracers coming up the ships. We could never return fire because they had a pacification program going on in the village to convince the people to be on the side of the government, not the bad guys. And we couldn't return fire. And finally, one day we came up with an idea. There's a lot of monkeys in Vietnam. We got a monkey. We put a harness on, or a collar on him, a long rope that caught him with a stick. He was so mean to everybody that walked by, he wanted to jump on you and bite you.
Wow.
And then finally, after we thought he was ready, we used to drop parachute flares to illuminate the battlefield at night. We took the chute off, which is about 3 feet in diameter, and it's got lanyards, which are the ropes that connect the harness to the parachute. We rigged up an easy to get out of the harness. We put the monkey in the harness. We dropped him over the village, broad daylight. Well, that monkey was very inquisitive. He got halfway down. He wanted a better view. So he climbed up the lanyard. That's the ropes that connect the chute from the harness. He got atop the parachute, and needless to say, it collapsed, and he went down like a bag of concrete. We got a second monkey. That one was even meaner than the first one. We thought he was ready. We dropped him off over the village. Once a week, the 25th Division would publish a newsletter highlighting all the operations that the different units have been involved in. Front page of the newsletter: rabid monkey bites 6 villagers. Yay, we got back at those SOBs.
Oh, boy.
I could tell many stories like that.
Oh, I bet you could. Maybe we should revisit and you can share a lot. I bet you tell that one at a few dinners. The book is called No Soldier Left Behind, all right? No Soldier Left Behind. The Life and Times of Brigadier General John G. Colhavy, United States Army, retired. And the book is available at Amazon and, of course, Barnes & Noble. And I'll put the trailer, too, for the book on my site, markbishopmedia.com. That's all you've got to do is go to www.markbishopmedia.com and go to shows, and you scroll down and you'll see Nothing Like a Good Book, and that'll be the trailer there for the movie as well. So I hope it does well for our author, whom I didn't get to talk to today, but maybe another time, Don Steele, PhD, who wrote, he does the Legacy series, actually. He's a great biography author, Dr. Donald Steele. Brigadier, it's been wonderful. Thank you so much. Again, thank you so much for your service, all you did. A lot of parents would be very happy with you, one way or another. And, all you have done. Stay alive, stay fit, have a wonderful life. You deserve it. And enjoy that nice home with the lake view. All right?
Thank you. And remember, fight, fight, fight.
Goodbye, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.